You know, I gotta give credit where credit is due sometimes. Brandon Johnson, the woke progressive mayor of the city of Chicago, has been going on the news talking about how much he loves migrants, how much he welcomes migrants. He's been saying that Chicago's values will not be challenged and that this is evil white racism trying to get revenge for losing the Civil War and trying to be mad at him for being a black man that is free.
It is abysmal. And it's an affront for everything that is good about this country, for the extremism in this country to use people as political tools to settle political scores for something that happened 400 years ago. They're still mad that a black man is free in this country.
But on the DL, behind the scenes, Brandon Johnson is doing everything possible to make it basically impossible for migrants to arrive at the city of Chicago. If only the US federal government had the level of border control that Chicago is trying to implement, we might be in a better position when it comes to all these migrants flooding the southern border. Now, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about what he's saying superficially versus what he's actually doing. But before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody signed up on actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform. So in order to understand where we are, it's important that you guys get how we got here. So I'm going to give you a quick recap of what led us to this point, and then I'm going to tell you what Brandon Johnson is doing now, despite his rhetoric to the national news media. So we've had immigration problems specifically at the southern border for a long time in the United States of America. Both Democrats and Republicans have traditionally been very lax on border enforcement, although now this has become a race issue in that the Democrats call you racist for trying to have any kind of control over who comes into the United States of America. Now, this all came to a head when President Donald J. Trump took office, and all of these left-wing cities decided that they wanted to virtue signal against his immigration stances by adding to previously existing sanctuary city laws, essentially making their cities super sanctuary cities. And among the people who did this were then Mayor at the time, Bill de Blasio of New York City, and Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who then was the mayor of the city of Chicago. Now, by contrast of these two cities, they ended up electing a more conservative mayor in Mayor Eric Adams, and he has been very honest about the disaster that the migrant crisis is for the city of New York.
Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just getting Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian-speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City. And everyone is saying it's New York City's problem. Every community in this city is going to be impacted. We got a $12 billion deficit that we're going to have to cut. Every service in this city is going to be impacted.
Now, Adams has notably gone further than that. Him and Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, have gone after the Biden administration, asked for more federal funding, and essentially admitted and conceded that the migrant problem is real, it is a disaster, and that the federal government needs to do something about it. By contrast, Brandon Johnson over in Chicago has not backed down, at least rhetorically. He says, we're welcoming all the migrants are the best people ever. He goes and meets and shakes their hand. However, behind the scenes, Brandon Johnson of Chicago has done more to deter migrants from coming to the city of Chicago than Eric Adams. It's actually kind of hilarious that he talks about in press conferences how he wants to go to Mexico and tell people that they can be welcome in the city of Chicago. He names a specific alderman that was letting them know how things were going to be so that they can coordinate better.
Look, Pastor Will Hall, who's also an alderman of the 6th Ward, visited the border. He saw the chaos firsthand. And so part of our effort to go to the border was to make sure that there was better coordination with the flow of migrants who are seeking asylum here.
When in reality, that specific representative went there with him to tell people not to come to the city of Chicago, to tell them that they would be sleeping on the concrete, that it's cold in Chicago, and essentially scare them away.
Sixth-Ward Alderman Will Hall, who traveled to the border a few weeks ago, says word is spreading on social media among migrants that Chicago may not be the best place to come. And border nonprofits say not as many people are asking to come to Chicago.
Well, people are beginning to get informed that it's cold, the opportunities are scarce, and that unless you want to sleep on a concrete mattress, don't come. And that's what those who have come seeking asylum have said.
Now, the secret that they're not trying to let you in on about Chicago and about New York City is the fact that it's not actually Greg Abbott sending the bulk of migrants to either of those cities. I know that's getting a lot of attention, and it is a good policy. It's essentially a stunt that allows the people that are voting on a national level and voting for these sanctuary laws on a local level to feel the impact that Texas and other border states have been feeling for years based on the policies that they advocate for. However, the majority of migrants that end up in New York City and end up in Chicago come to those cities for the public benefits. New York has a right to shelter, which means that anybody can go to a government official and ask for shelter, and if there's no room in any given shelter, they end up getting put up in hotels, and this has led to disastrous results, like migrants refusing to go to newly built migrant shelters because they believe they have a divine right to be hoteled in luxury Manhattan hotels near and around Central Park. And in fact, one of the migrant activists actually at some point said that the New York City should seize the apartments from billionaires in order to put up the migrants, because apparently they have a divine right to live in the most luxury apartments on planet Earth that are in New York City's Billionaires Row.
Volunteer advocates argue the city should put these migrants in some of the most expensive pieces of real estate in the world.
He could have easily, along with Governor Hochul, opened up all the vacant luxury apartments. We are on 57th Street right now. This is Billionaires Row. Half of the super towers on this street are empty.
Now, by the same token, in the city of Chicago, part of their pro-illegal immigration acts that Lori Lightfoot put into place make it so that for public benefits, they will not be checking immigration status, meaning that if you're here illegally, you are entitled to the same level of public benefits, whether you work or not, as your average everyday citizen. And this has drawn a lot of people to Chicago. However, unlike New York City, which tried to house all of these people at great cost to the taxpayer, the city of Chicago has been putting them out on the streets and hoping that Ned Stark was right and that winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
And because winter did come, because these migrants, who a lot of them are from Venezuela, experienced snow for the first time, we got reports from the migrants that they actually want to go back to Venezuela. They don't want to be in the city of Chicago, which is all a part of Brendan Johnson's scheme, which is to say that he's super welcoming to migrants. However, when they get there, you leave them out on the street, you hope the cold changes their mind, and that deters people from coming further. Again, like I said, he and his aldermen actually went down to the border to deter people from coming, to tell them that they weren't welcome, all while pretending superficially to the mainstream media that they absolutely love the migrants, they welcome the migrants, and all that. Well, guess what? They've actually taken it a step further beyond that. Now they're targeting the buses that bring migrants to the city of Chicago. What they did was pass a series of ordinances to crack down on them. They require different permits, different licenses, and in some areas they banned migrant buses altogether. Again, this is all while Brandon Johnson says that he's welcoming to migrants, that he wants them to come here, that they're going to support them. They're not changing their laws on welfare benefits. Yet this has led to a decrease in migrant traffic to the city of Chicago. However, they actually took it an even step further than that, and now they're impounding buses from Texas in order to scare off any companies from arriving at the city of Chicago.
And we have just learned in the last couple of hours that the city of Chicago has impounded a migrant bus for the first time. The city council passing a measure today to start impounding buses that do not obtain a permit from CDOT.
Now look, to be 100% clear, I'm not actually against these level of border controls. I'm not actually against this migrant policy for our nation as a whole. The idea that we allow thousands of people to millions of people to come up, rush our border each and every day, go to ports of entry, and commit asylum fraud, and we'll say we're going to adjudicate those cases years out while we let them into the interior of the country is absurd. It's ridiculous. It's insane. But the thing is, in Chicago, and specifically people like Brandon Johnson, said that that's not a problem, said that they wanted the migrants, said that they welcomed the migrants, even changed their laws so that they could give out more public benefits to the migrants. And unlike Eric Adams, Brandon Johnson is not backing down, at least publicly, not admitting that he's wrong while he's doing all this shady behind the scenes stuff. So if you're a bus company, you are now put on notice that if you show up in the city of Chicago with a bunch of migrants, they have a bunch of ordinances that allow them to seize your buses. This is meant as a deterrent in order to prevent more migrants from showing up to the city, and it's clear and it's obvious that is the goal and intent behind it. Just like the trip to Mexico, where they told them about the cold and the snow and how they're going to be miserable and how they got nothing for them, what they're actually showing us in terms of their policy is that they don't want those migrants there. They are against those migrants.
Chicago's Democrat Mayor Brandon Johnson has decided to sue bus companies for transporting illegal migrants into his sanctuary city.
Last month, Chicago's City Council passed a series of laws meant to regulate buses dropping off migrants. He's now launched 55 lawsuits against what he's deemed rogue companies for violating the regulations.
And again, that is totally fine. That is good, sound policy, and that is policy that the American federal government should adopt. My problem is that Brandon Johnson won't admit that's what he's doing. He keeps saying that he's welcoming to migrants. He keeps calling everybody against mass migration to the United States evil white racists, and I think it's kind of absurd that he's essentially instituted more harsh border policies in and around the city of Chicago than we have nationwide, while calling out our nation for not being welcoming enough. You want to lead by example? Actually lead by example. The idea that you could seize buses and that you're going to do all this rather than admit that you're wrong, to me is insane. It's absurd. It's ridiculous, but that's what's really going on in the city of Chicago. They may be saying that they're welcoming to migrants, but in reality, they're not hoteling them like the city of New York is. They're putting them out on the streets. They're putting them out in tents. They're waiting for winter to scare them off, and they're doing everything in their power to deter new arrivals, even though on the surface, it says that they're handing out welfare checks and food benefits to any illegal that comes knocking on their door. This is the real face of Brandon Johnson. This is what he actually believes, and this is him reacting to black voters in particular, who are among his strongest voting base, coming after him about spending all this money on migrants versus based on their problems. Now look, those are my thoughts. That's my takeaway. I believe that should be your takeaway from these recent events, but I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you believe that Brandon Johnson's border policy in practice is good and something that we should get behind? Or do you believe that if he's going to talk about how Chicago lives up to their values, if he's going to talk about their welcoming to migrants ordinance and how he's so proud of it, he should be forced to live up to it? He shouldn't be allowed to impound out-of-state buses in order to prevent migrants from showing up. I really genuinely want to know what your take on this is, because I think a lot of people support the border policy in practice. However, they want Chicago to pay the consequences of the migration policy that they advocate for on a nationwide level, and they want Brandon Johnson to actually humbly come and admit that he's wrong, because he is wrong on migrants, and the proof in the pudding is in the taste. But unfortunately, you can't taste that pudding because it's in a Chicago impound lot. Again, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the Chicago crackdown. Till next time.